Happy New Year everyone! 2025 is finally over, which means this year there are gonna be many new anime and also many new sculptures that I wanna make. But for now I still have a figure left that I made last year, so bear with me. If you've seen the 2025 recap video, you already know which figure I'm talking about.
It's Deku!
Go watch it, you won't regret it.
Don't cry, my followers. I got the same video to feed you the entire month.
As I've stated in that video, My Hero Academia has ended last year. I think that there is one final episode coming out this year, I'm not quite sure, but in the meantime there's also My Hero Academia Vigilantes. That all doesn't matter though, because 2 years ago Vigilante Deku was finally animated. And I really liked his design. Even while I've read the manga, I already thought, this guy, I have to make him. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Let's get the boring bits out of the way and start with the base as always. Since Vigilante Deku is walking on a street, I decided that I would use 3 leftover wooden plates and glue them together. I then covered it with a thin sheet of clay and pressed in some texture with a rock. This would mimic the street. With that out of the way, let's make the wire skeleton and put it in the appropriate position. Then you just have to throw some clay on there and start sculpting it. And as always, it is very important to shape the clay into the form that you need. For me, it is just the basic shape of legs and arms. With the basic shape of the torso being finished, icons of the clothes. Quite the boring process since it's basically all the same every time. So I'm gonna skip ahead, and dude has a shit ton of details. Since Vigilante Deku's suit is really tethered, I had to use Cosclay to make the overall tethered pieces of clothes. The reason being, Cosclay is much more flexible than Super Sculpey, and that way it would probably not break as much as it would with Super Sculpey. Anyway, since I've never really made tethered clothes, this was a big ass freestyle. So yeah, it turned out okay. I used some tweezers to rip out some clay and then added a shit ton of scratches to represent that it is really tethered. And like I said, yeah, it turned out fine, I think. After the sleeves were done, I added the belt and the overall details on the suit. The last time I used that many clay strips was when I made Moon Knight, I think. And yeah, it was really annoying to make, but you gotta do what you gotta do. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I have no clue how to narrate this, so I'm just gonna show you how I did it and I think you'll get the rest. At least for the parts where I don't really have anything to say. With most of the details of the torso out of the way, I had to start making the belt pockets. To make those, I cut a piece of clay into 4 individual cubes, added thin clay strips for the flaps, and added 2 tiny clay balls for the buttons. After that, I used my tweezers again and kinda roughened them up. Using some wires, I managed to secure them on the sides of the belt, but I didn't glue them on yet, so it would be easier to paint it later. Moving on, it is now time to make the very interesting, definitely not like funnel looking legs, by wrapping a piece of clay around the underside of the knee. Then I connected the lower section of this cone thingy by blending it smooth, and added another clay strip around the upper side of the knee. I used the same techniques that I used for the sleeves here, so there's not much to say. I also added a square piece of clay to make the knee pads. And of course I added a lot more of wear and tear as well as scratches. With the legs basically being finished, I started to add the shoes. I didn't complete them yet because I wanted to finish the upper half of the body first, but this helps to get the basic idea how the shape of the shoe would be. To make Deku's red gauntlets, it was just a matter of wrapping many thin clay strips around the arms themselves. And since most of his gear is basically broken at this point, I opted to make some of these clay strips stand up. And again, like always, I used tweezers and added many scratches. I'm not gonna lie when I say this, that this figure might just be one of the most annoying sculptures that I've ever made, because everything is so brittle. I really had to be careful not to accidentally ruin the detail and break one of these clay pieces off, which overall made it very hard to handle, especially while painting. Moving on, it was now time to complete the red Timberland steel cap boots. For that, I took the already prepared shoe that I made beforehand, baked it, and then started sculpting the details. I'm gonna demonstrate this on only one of the shoes because it's much easier that way, especially because on this one I have to sculpt the underside as well because it is visible. To make this shoe, like I said, you have to sculpt the basic shape of the shoe and then add the metal pieces on top of it. For that I added the clay onto the front of the foot and started breaking it down into geometrical shapes. That way it is much easier to get the details right. And again, I don't really know how to describe this process and the overall shape of the foot, but it kinda reminds me of like a sandal out of metal that is wrapped around a shoe. Anyways, you get the basic idea. And once the shoes were done and baked, I just had to glue them onto the bottom of the legs, where they belong. Setting the figure aside again, it was now time to sculpt the backpack. I wrapped a tiny aluminum cube into a piece of clay, which I then shaped into the appropriate shape. Since that was rather easy, it was now time to add the details by using tiny clay noodles and tiny clay strips. And again, as always, add some scratches to roughen it up a bit. After having thrown it into the oven again, it was just a matter of gluing it onto the back and then making the straps. Since this is rather fragile and I had some leftover green stuff that I used a while ago, I made them out of green stuff. Just cut them to shape and glue them on where you need them. But of course, to add some further details, I also had to add another clay strap on top of it, since that's how backpack straps usually are. With all of that, the body is basically done, so it is now time to make the hands. Since this video is long enough as it is, I'm gonna skip the part where I show you how I made the wire skeleton of the hands, because you can watch them in every other video that I've made, so go check them out. As always, it was just a matter of covering the wire skeleton of the hands with some Cosclay doll, since it sticks really well to wire, and the good thing is that since the entire fit is tethered, I didn't really have to be careful with the details. So that process was rather fast compared to usually. Once I finished the hands, I drilled in a hole onto the bottom of the arms and glued them there. And since they are gloves, I had to add some more clay to cover up the seam between the arms and the hands. Now before I make the cape and the hat, I have to do black whip. For that I whipped out a thin iron metal wire, threw it on the table and had the black whip ready. Or at least the basic shape of it. Now to add the details I have decided to use a technique that I have never used before. I bought myself some black hot glue sticks, so I'm gonna try to put it on top of the wire to make it look more organically. I'm really looking forward to if that works, so let's just try it out. Surprisingly, this was one of the best ideas that I've had in a very long time, and it turned out just as I expected. Adding the hot glue truly makes it look more organic and more like it is moving in the anime. I don't know how to describe it. I think you guys understand what I mean. Do you? I hope so. Anyways, it looks fucking cool. So here's the rest of them. To seamlessly add them onto the figure, I drilled a few holes onto the backpack and then just stuck them in and connected them using hot glue again. I had to make them removable because these things would melt in the oven and I still need to make the cape as well as the head. Speaking of the head, I'm really glad that Deku is wearing his mask because I'll be honest, I didn't really want to make an anime head. You know me, you know the drill. In my humble opinion, it is much easier to sculpt detail faces because you have more points of reference that you can take to actually make this 3D, unlike with 2D faces. That said, I started this head by making the hair first. It wasn't really easy to capture Deku's weird hair, so I just kinda freestyled it. And to make it easier for myself, I also sculpted the front, but I then removed it to make the mask. Since Deku's mask is inspired by All Might's hair and the two strands that are standing up, I added 2 wires to the front of the face for stabilization purposes. Once the wires were glued onto the appropriate position, I added a piece of clay with the eyes already cut out. Onto the wires themselves, I added 2 thin clay strips, and then I blended the 2 pieces together. With the basics completed, I used my tweezers again and pulled on the 2 clay strips to add the detail. And of course, I also had to add the scratches again. I added clay again and cut them into the appropriate shape, which kinda looks like a diamond. The good thing about this entire build is that since Deku's gear is broken, I can just blame bad details onto the broken pieces of the suit. That's really nice because I can cover laziness by saying that's intended detail. With the head being done, I just had to add the neck and then removed it from the body itself because I still needed to make the cape. Also, to be able to properly connect the head to the body, I used 3 wires as well as 3 holes in the body itself. Since it's now time to make the cape, I had to use Cosclay separator again. I already used this for my Hollow Knight figure, so if you want to check out that video, go do that. Since I needed a proper base for the cape, I used some wire mesh again, just like with the Hollow Knight figure. I covered that with a basic shape of clay, then added it to the body and started to add more clay to make the folds and the wrinkles of the cape. Since this cape kind of reminds me of a scarf, I also had to make sure that it properly covers the neck area. As for the folds themselves, I just eyeballed them and freestyled it. And again, to make the edges more rigid, I used my tweezers. And with that, the sculpting process is done. So let's move on to the painting. Starting with the street again, it was pretty simple. I just needed to add black acrylic wash. Since the clay itself is already grey, that already has the basic color of a street, so I just needed to add a few highlights, and that's what the black wash does. Now here's where the separated pieces come into play really well. I'm starting with the cape by painting it yellow. Now since this figure is rather complicated overall, I have decided against cel shading, especially because I think it would look much better if I just really dirty it up, and I think that's something that I can't really do if I were to cel shade it. So for the cape, since it's really dirty like the rest of the fucking suit, I added brown highlights and black highlights. I completely freestyled it since I have no idea what I'm doing and just worked with it until it looked good. Moving on, I painted the green areas of the suit and used black wash again to dirty it up. Deku's gauntlets as well as his belt and his shoes were painted a dark red, and again, just like with the entire figure, the black wash is everywhere. Since it's been quite a while since I've made this figure, I don't quite remember in which order I did it, but looking at the video I think I first painted the basic shapes, the appropriate colors, and then added the wash. You can do it however you like, I just don't remember. Naturally, I also had to paint his funnel legs black, as well as the lines on his suit, not to forget the shoes as well. As for the backpack, I tried using a different shaded yellow and painted the entire thing. But similar with the cape, I also added some brown highlights. There are also some shoulder pads that are white, and I painted those as well, even though you won't be able to see them because of the cape. Since the gloves are white, I decided that I wouldn't only use black acrylic wash, because that way it just looks too plain, so I also added some brown again to really make it seem like he was in the mud, or I don't know, maybe even touching shit, who knows. Same thing for the shoes, since he's mostly walking on bad weather, I decided that it would be much more interesting if the shoe had some color variation. To paint Deku's head, I first painted the hair as well as the mask and the eyes black. The mask has to be painted black first, because that way the silver is gonna pop out much better than it would be if I painted it plainly on the clay. I then started to paint the mask and then dirty it up again by using black wash. And since Deku's hair isn't just black but also a mixture of green, I dry brushed it on top of that. And as you can see while I'm painting the metal pieces of the mask, the fact that the black is in the gaps is really useful. There are some pieces distributed on the legs and the shoes of the suit that appear like rivets, so I painted those silver as well. Anyways, moving back to the mask, I still needed to complete the eyes. Now I really wanted to capture the depth of Deku's eyes, so I decided that I would use the darkest black that I could find on the internet and paint them. Sadly, it's not as black as I wanted it to be, but compared to the rest of the suit, there definitely is a difference. To highlight the brightness of the eyes, I first added 2 white dots and then colored them a light blue, in hopes that the eyes would appear a bit more brighter than they already are. Anyways, the only thing that was missing then was the pupils, so I added those as well. And with that, it was just a matter of assembling the entire figure, gluing it onto the base, and Deku is finished. Like I said, it's a good thing that I made the black whip removable, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to make it. Then just add the cape and the head, and Deku is done. Now I know that I wanted to release this video much earlier because I think I finished this figure in December last year, so I apologize for being late, as always. Life got in the way, I had exam season, and I'm writing my last one on Thursday, so wish me luck for that. Definitely not gonna fail. The good thing is that from Thursday on I can finally start making figures again. So stay tuned for that, because I'm gonna make Maki. Been hyped for this figure for like more than a year now, so yeah, I'm excited. I hope that it's gonna turn out well. And yeah, other than that, I don't really have that much to say. This is the smallest figure that I've ever sculpted, standing at 13 centimeters. So in a way, I'm kinda proud of myself that I managed to make this much detail in this small of a figure. The only thing that I kinda regret is that I used some clear spray paint to cover the entire figure, and sadly, it kinda gives it a little shine. Let's just blame the rain or something, because, I don't know, Deku is walking in rain, so let's just say he's wet. Doesn't matter. Anyways, it looks good enough as it is. And yeah. If you have any suggestions for more figures this year, especially with the upcoming anime, go write that in the comment section below. Other than that, I hope that you really did enjoy this video. If you did, you know the drill. I'm not gonna annoy you with that. Also, follow me on Instagram for updates on the figures that I'm making, and stay tuned. See you next time. Bye bye.